So okay, so I don't know if any. Have you ever gone to a concert before, and maybe like the opener is someone that you love, and you didn't expect them to be there. Like you go to something and like,
Yes.
oh surprise, like oh your favorite. So I'm sitting there and I'm in this keynote, I'm like enjoying myself. This thing's awesome, blah blah blah. And so they start talking about sending these to space. And so, chirp, chirp. I'm like, oh, space, what's going on? And they introduce, and it's so funny because we talked about this, and I never really looked at the other investors of the company, but all of a sudden they introduced Hubble Network. If you remember, we talked about Hubble on like the last episode or two episodes
Yeah.
ago. And so I start fangirling. I'm like, and they're like, "Hey, oh, here comes Alex," and I'm like, yeah, oh my god, yeah, like, I'm like, oh my god, like this is my like, favorite company of all time right now. So I'm like over in this corner, like the media side, like yes.
Welcome into another episode of Everything is Logistics, a podcast for the thinkers in freight. We are proudly presented by SPI Logistics, and we've got Grace Sharkey back for another episode of Freight Friends. We are recording the day before 4th of July, so July 3rd. Grace, welcome back. And two, do you have a movie that you watch for July 4th?
A July 4th movie.
Yeah, like a go-to movie that you got to watch on July 4th.
Honestly, no. I'm usually at the same location, and it gets really terrible service. So it's like and internet too is kind of shitty. So a lot of times it's like whatever's on the TV works. So it's on the lake. So honestly, if I'm watching anything, it's boats coming in and out all night. And I tell people this all the time, and like I'm biased, and I also think like this sounds stupid, but Ludington, Michigan, the city of Ludington puts on the best fireworks show I've ever seen in my whole entire life. Like so we like rent out. My family rents out these like spots, and my mom like make fun of me because I'll be in like I'm usually on the second floor, a couple rooms down from them, but she makes fun of me because she can like hear me oohing and awing from like afar. Like I'm like in it. I'll be like, yes, let's go. Like what? Like that's me. I'm like, no, they didn't. Like, and then I'll like come and crash their room afterwards and be like, wasn't. I don't know how whoever's like doing the artistry behind this wonderful fireworks show is just like it gets me every year, and every year they top it off. And so if anything, I'm watching the artistry of a middle class, upper middle class beach town fireworks show. So that's mine. But no, not any movies that I can think
I think,
of.
well, that might be actually kind of better to like not have any service, to not,
Yes.
be distracted, because we've already kind of talked about in our house, not going on social media, just
Yeah.
having like a tech break
Yes.
for the holiday, especially because July is kind of like the last, I think, sort of full beach month
Yes.
for us in Florida, that we can go and just,
Do yeah.
hang out and not be consumed by August is typically like when the busy season starts. Like you got football season starting up, you got schools about to come back. And so July is like the relaxation time.
Plus
So
the beach is like bathwater down there by the time it's
oh, it
August.
feels so nice right now.
Oh,
Like it's
oh
it's
right
not
now, yeah.
quite bathwater, at least on like the eastern coast. The western coast of Florida, especially like the Gulf. I don't know how those people do it, because number one, the riptides are so much worse. Number
Mm.
two, they have just an influx of shark attacks going on right now. And that's because there's like a pod of orcas that are apparently in the Gulf. And so orcas hunt. We've talked about it on this show. Like
Yeah,
orca
horses.
revenge. But orcas are forcing these sharks, aggressive sharks like hammerheads and those very like large sharks, closer to shore. And there's all these videos of like just people in their like high rise hotels videoing like sharks coming and going, and it's like they're going up onto the shoreline in order to try to like catch fish, because their habitat's being pushed closer in. So there's like all these, yeah. So anyways, I don't know what the people do like on the Gulf as far as like swimming, but I was in Cocoa Beach last week, and the water was just, I mean, beautiful. Like, the light aqua color. You got the.
Ooh,
We'll talk about this in a little bit, but there's like these like launch pads from NASA, like off in the distance. We got the Cape
that's
Canaveral port
cool.
that's right there. I mean, it was just like it's beautiful, and like the water is so calm that you could just float out in the ocean and not necessarily float away in a riptide.
Yeah,
Like, I mean, riptides obviously exist on the eastern side of Florida, but it's like ample beach time this time of the year. But I will make an exception as far as movies are concerned for Independence Day, because the president
never
from
seen it.
what?
It's on my list of ones to see behind Die Hard as well. Because I've seen like clips of it, and it's one of those. At least Independence Day is one of those movies where I think I'll love it.
I
It
mean, you're
just
talking like Will Smith.
it's
That's like
on.
the
Where can I
peak.
stream it? Where's it on? What's it on?
Let me find it. Independence Day
Maybe I'll
movie.
download it so I can watch it this
It
weekend.
should be like on repeat for a lot of like TNT or
Perfect.
one of those types of channels. But who is it? Yeah, it's
I know Will Smith is in it, right?
yeah, Will Smith is the star in it. You also have Vivica Fox that's in it.
Oh,
Bill
love.
Pullman, who is the president, and he gives the most amazing like presidential speech. Like, I still, like, to this day, like, get goosebumps listening to it. I could probably recite it like line by line. But it's like a come together moment, where
Love
it's an
that.
Independence Day not just for the U.S. but for the world. So it's great.
How American of us.
I do. I do feel like I dress like it looks kind of purple on the screen, so I don't know what maybe like
No, it looks
colorblind or
blue.
something. Oh, it does. Okay, good.
Yeah, it's blending like well with the background.
And then I have my rocket mug from NASA, so
Love that.
I'm fresh off of a trip to NASA, and I'll talk about
You
that.
even have
And
the bag back there behind you too.
that's like my merch
Well
bag that they
placed.
gave, like all of they gave us so much merch, like patches.
Stop.
Sorry. So I'm gonna do
Wait,
like a little like unboxing video.
I do want to say, speaking of merch, and this is like now the audience gets to learn about our lives. I did get a Porsche pen.
Ooh! Have you
But
written with it yet? Is it not amazing?
it's pretty good. I will say I can only get one, so this is gonna go to you at some point.
Oh, why could they only give you one?
So that's a great story. So I get to the Porsche place. So anyone that went to the Atlanta event for Freight Waves, you went to the Porsche event, right? Which was awesome. And I had told a couple people, actually I kind of forgot about it, and then I told a couple people, and then like they came up to me when I was there and like, did you find any pets yet? I was like, oh, thanks for reminding me. So then I started just scavenging every table I could find, like going behind, like I was looked like an employee looking for something, and there was no pens anywhere. And about now I didn't go downstairs to where they were like people I think were signing all the paperwork to like say if I, it's not my fault if I die situation. But then I found the security guard and I was like, hey, what's up, man? And he's like, what's up? And I was like, hey, man, where are all the pens at? And he gave me this look like he knew exactly what I was talking
Oh,
about.
so the word has gotten out.
Yeah, and he goes, well, during events now we put them like in the back room. They like specifically understand the pen situation, and I was like, oh man. It's like I'm trying to get my girl a pen, my dude, and he's like, I'll tell you what. And then he pulls this sucker right out of his back pocket, and I'm like, man, you're the best. And then I left to go get dinner. So I got one just to
Oh my
say I
gosh.
did it.
Are you in freight sales with a book of business looking for a new home? Or perhaps you're a freight agent in need of a better partnership? These are the kinds of conversations we're exploring in our podcast interview series called The Freight Agent Trenches, sponsored by SPI Logistics. Now, I can tell you all day that SPI is one of the most successful logistics firms in North America who helps their agents with back office operations such as admin, finance, IT, and sales, but I would much rather you hear it directly from SPI's freight agents themselves. And what better way to do that than by listening to the experienced freight agents tell their stories behind the how and the why they joined SPI. Hit the Freight Agent link in our show notes to listen to these conversations, or if you're ready to make the jump, visit spi3pl.com.
Well, let me
what'd you
show
get me from NASA?
Hold on.
This better be good.
Okay, we're back. So before we get to, because I do want to recap your Samsara event, but since we're already on the topic, I did want to bring up your previous story, because I will say, so NASA Social, I'll just get into it now, which is very related to what you were just talking about. So NASA Social is an event or not an event, but it's a program within NASA that they try to get civilians in order to come visit and take part in a launch and go behind the scenes. And it's a really, really cool program that they started years ago, and then it went on kind of a little bit of a hiatus. I first learned about it in 2019. So obviously we all know what happened in 2020. So a lot of these tours got shut down.
Yeah.
Well, so I was already on the email list in 2019, because they have an email list that if you sign up for it, then they will send out an email when a next NASA Social event is coming up.
Nice.
And so when you get those emails, like you want to apply, like you're almost like applying for press credentials, but anybody can do it as long as you regularly post to social media, and kind of have, I would imagine, a little bit of a professional approach. Like you can't just, I don't know, be like an OnlyFans model or something. Like,
yeah, for sure.
You didn't invite to NASA because you post to social. So you have to have some kind of like a professional profile. And so you apply, and there's like a little box that says, like, if you come to one of these events, what kind of stories or what kind of social media do you think you will be creating? And so I tried to do it in 2019. Obviously, it didn't get accepted. Obviously, everything happens with 2020. It takes a couple years from a federal perspective, because this is federal land. Even though we're in Florida, and Florida kind of did its own thing during 2020 and beyond. So technically you could do certain things in the state of Florida, but you couldn't do it on federal property. So it took a while for the NASA Social programs to come back. I'm talking years for it to come back. So I started getting the emails again. I think I got 2 more, and I applied, and just, you don't hear back, so you don't get accepted. Well, they sent another email, and I was like, okay, I'm going to apply again. I'm just going to keep doing it. I'm just going to keep being stubborn until they finally let me in. But I took a little bit extra care with the type of story that they were asking, in the little box that they were asking. Like, I planned to do, I was like, oh, I have a logistics podcast. It's called Everything is Logistics. I've covered a lot of the ground transportation, rail, warehousing, that kind of thing. Now I would love to have like a space logistics episode. And I think they really liked that, because they ultimately approved me.
Yeah.
So I go and do all of this, and I think I applied like 2 days before we recorded this episode. And so, like, as you were talking about this, I'm thinking in the back of my mind, like, oh man, I really hope that I'm able to see this sometime in person. And so this is a clip from back in our episode. So hopefully it will play. Let me hit
the rocket ships, right? Like what we sent to space, spaceships, etc. Is they move them on the lift off platforms on a giant, what they call crawler. Now, to give you a little bit of.
So when you were talking about the crawler in that pic, I had no idea that it was actually I assumed, thinking back on it, I assumed. But now, as far as giveaways are concerned, because you were talking about the transporter, the transporter is one of 2 pieces of machinery that it travels. It's hosted every single launch that NASA has ever done. So whether it's a rocket, whether it's a SpaceX, or any of those things, the rocket is put on that transporter, and it goes 1 mile an hour. It takes 8 hours to get from the facility to the launch pad. 8 hours, because it goes 1 mile an hour. They have this special road that is a gravel road, and it runs adjacent to just a regular road that cars go on. And so this gravel road, and so all that to say, I got you a rock from the
The
gravel
road?
road.
Woo! We're just talking about rocks. Yay!
So you now have a transporter rock that I'll give to you, next time I see you.
Was it
Um,
huge?
it was a massive. Hold on, I'll bring it
I
up.
saw you next to it and it looked. I mean, I know that you're not the tallest person in the world, but this thing looks
It is
huge.
massive, and I'm sorry if you're just listening to this, but if you go to my Instagram at Blythe Brum, you can see, a couple of these images just to sort of get a glimpse into how massive these things are. So I'm just standing. If
Wow.
you're just listening, I'm standing in front of one of the quote unquote sort of I guess wheels. It looks almost like a tank as far as like the
Yeah.
wheels are concerned, where it's like these treads that just go over a bunch of smaller wheels. But it's very difficult to explain the scale of these things at NASA. So we were in the vehicle assembly lab, or a vehicle assembly building, where it's like 80 stories tall. That's how far it has to fit for a lot of these different rockets. And so this transporter, if you're looking at it on the screen, it's so massive that I don't know that I can truly justify it if you're just listening, from a podcast perspective. But they are truly, truly massive, like the biggest pieces of machinery that you've ever seen. So I thought that was a good like tie in, or a
Yeah.
full circle moment, because I remember like applying to this NASA social thing like a couple of days before you told this story. And so I'm listening to you talk about it. I'm like, well, that would be really cool to see. Hopefully I'll get accepted, but I'll probably get rejected again. So
That's so awesome.
but then as you get accepted to this program, like it's a whole like 2-day event. And I have 5 podcasts scheduled to come out just from this 2-day trip of like just things I recorded. I wanted to cover one of these topics later on in the show, but it's so much that it would take up too much time. So I'm just going to save that for like an independent
Awesome.
episode, because it literally is like at least 30 minutes of me going through and discussing and all the sound bites and audio. But I have a deep space logistics episode coming up soon. There's even one about probably one of the coolest parts was how they're growing different plants in space, or how they're simulating it here on Earth in order to help give the astronauts a little bit more variety of
Yeah.
food to eat up in space, because they're always concerned about like the mental well-being, and when you're eating a lot of the same foods over and over again, it can kind of drive you crazy.
For sure.
So they're trying to grow all of these different types of plants here on Earth in those simulated environments, and even like teas and stuff like that they can send up to them so that they can have some kind of semblance of home. So they also will grow food, and they're grow food for like holidays, or ship food up for holidays. So all of that, plus like just the commercialization of space. So if you think about it from the lens of like, think of like the US and how the US like infrastructure started getting built. You have the expansion out west. You have railroads getting built, highways getting built, and you have to develop not only that infrastructure but like the maintenance side of things too, and the resupply of goods. And so it's not just about going up into space, where we used to have 2 or 3 launches a year. Now there's 2 or 3 launches a week. And so it's so much stuff that's going up into space, and they have to start building some of these infrastructure in space for like maintenance, and all the satellites that are going up there. They want to extend the life of the satellite, and how do we do that? Well, we send a maintenance robot up there, or different things like that. Transporter missions where they're just the goal of sending up supplies. No humans on board. So it's all of these like different components. So yeah, that's why I have 5 episodes coming out. But I thought that was a good moment to show you your rock.
What
Sort of
what
rock.
were they when that rocket you saw, what was that for? Like, was that going up to the space station? Like, were they what exactly were they doing with that?
So it's called NASA Goes U. So Goes U is part of a series of satellites from the National Oceanic Aeronautic, or National Oceanic Atmospheric association so basically weather. So weather satellites. This particular satellite is going up to give us a better view of the east and the west coast of the United States, where it's constantly monitoring, the weather patterns, storm clouds, lightning is another big thing that they're measuring with these satellites. Also with hurricane monitoring, a lot of these hurricanes that hit the East Coast or the Gulf, they come off the coast of Western Africa. But then that can also be impacted by the winds and the sand that come off of the western coast of Africa, because if it's a bunch of sand, then it cuts the top off of hurricanes, and the hurricanes it just lose all steam, and because the sand is added to the moisture and the weather patterns. So it's basically to monitor those weather activities. In addition, they're going to be monitoring the solar flares that come off of the sun, because right now it's very much delayed. On if we were to know about a solar flare, it's about a 30-minute delay after the solar flare would potentially hit us. So solar flares, if it hits the planet in a certain way, it takes out communications, it takes out other satellites. But this satellite, the GOES-U satellite, will be monitoring those, so we can get them within a minute and be able to plan ahead of time. So in our tour, there was 28 of us, I believe, in this NASA social group. And I would say probably half of them were all meteorologists. And what was really cool or interesting to see is that you're on like pins and needles for those 2 days, because the culmination of those 2 days is supposed to be the launch. And when we went to sleep on day one, it was not looking likely that the launch was going to happen. And you have all of these meteorologists that are trying to like predict the weather for the next day, and they have frankly no idea on if the launch is going to happen or not. And so it's kind of like, it was kind of funny that the launch, obviously, spoiler alert, did happen. But from the weather perspective, like this satellite is going to help them make those better, predictions in the future, because they have more data to look at and to decipher through. Which another cool thing that I didn't know, but like all of this data from the NOAA, it's not open source, but it's free for anyone to take that data and then to use it in your own satellite and your own, data modeling. And even here on, in transportation and logistics, obviously weather impacts, our livelihood. And so from that perspective, this new GOES-U satellite is supposed to help, the meteorologist, and help with logistics and help with planning and to avoid future disasters. So incredibly beneficial trip. Like I said, I'm still filtering through hundreds of media files, because I brought my podcast camera, which I never take down ever. But I brought my real camera. I had 2 cell phones. Like another hack too, like in all of these like different meetings that we went to, like I just had Otter on my phone, and it would just a recording of the conversations that the instructors were telling us about. So there's a gentleman, his name is Jim. I think it's Jim Doyle. I don't want to blank on his last name, but I know his first name was Jim. But he has been working on the transporters for decades. And so I recorded like the whole conversation with him, and they have like 8 drivers for the transporter, and one of them is a woman. So I thought that was cool. There's only 8 drivers, like, because I asked, I was like, do you have to have a CDL, or what do you do? Like, how do these drivers get qualified? And he said that you have to work on maintenance wise, you have to work on the transporter for a few years, and then you're allowed to become a driver. So it's not just like you apply and then you become a driver. It's like this upper echelon.
A mile an hour, like.
And it's pretty much like on autopilot too. So
it's probably because they want you, because if I remember correctly doing it's like those things cannot break down, right? Like, because then what do? You're stuck in the middle of this, you're half a mile into a mile-long journey with a rocket ship on your back. Like, what's taking that off?
So to kind of, I guess, drive home the point of how many launches that are happening now, we had our scheduled launch for that Tuesday night, which was on the Falcon Heavy, which is a SpaceX rocket. And so they're sending that GOES-U satellite. So that's the only satellite that's on that particular mission. But there's other missions that are called transporter missions, and those are, you know, a bunch of like Starlink satellites, for example, or a bunch of private company satellites. Up to, I think, like 100 different satellite companies can be on one transporter mission.
Oh, wow.
And we were, you know, driving around, you know, going to the different spots on the tour, and we actually got stopped in traffic, like bumper to bumper traffic, because a Starlink transporter was being moved from one place to another for a launch the very next day. So it's so many launches that are going on. If you've never had a chance to go to one, I literally heard a meteorologist say, like, if you want to, or an astrophotographer, that was another, there was probably like a half a dozen like astrophotographers that came on this trip just to be able to snap photos of the launch. But he mentioned that if you ever want to see a launch, just come to Orlando and you'll see 3 in a week. And that's exactly how many I saw when I was there. And it was just, it's so incredible. There's so many places like on the beach up and down that you can get a really good glimpse. But just even of the launch itself, we were about 3 miles away, which is about as close as you can get. It still felt like I should maybe be wearing like some safety glasses or like goggles or something, because the flames of it were so bright that that's when I was like, oh, maybe I should have some glasses on or something. Like, and you could feel the heat, you could feel the rumble. So highly advise, you know, anybody who's thinking about, you know, going and witnessing a launch, to just go to like the Cocoa Beach area. It's a really cute little beach town, and you can set up shop on a beach and probably catch, you know, a couple launches. And it was so great. I'm more content coming soon. I'm still going through all of the files because I have all of these otter notes that I have, my real camera, and then 2 different cell phones in order to try to capture, you know, different parts of it without, you know, not clogging up, but running out of space on my main cell phone. So I had to bring like a backup cell phone in order to record, you know, a lot of different video too. So
nice. It'll be a good episode then.
5 episodes I'm coming out with. So
wow.
Yeah. So 5 additional episodes that will, you know, talk about different parts of the trip. And I mean, it's so much content to sort through. So I'm excited to.
You're like, what content are you making? Like, what content am I not making?
Right. I even found like extra content to make, because as I was prepping for this show, I was going to talk about sort of the next frontier, or they call, I think, Alaska the last frontier, as far as like exploration is concerned. But space is really that next frontier, of how we're establishing just maintenance, infrastructure, you know, supplies, like, you know, just a supply chain to and from space. And, you know, I'm fascinated by the whole process. So yeah, like 5 episodes, I believe, that are going to be coming out starting, I think, mid-July is when the earliest one will come out. So sorry to my podcast editor, to Josh, but we are going to be working over the next few weeks on these episodes.
Paid, right? Yeah. It's like, oh no.
Well, I was at NASA. You were at a really cool event.
Yeah.
Samsara, tell us about it.
So I will say, for all you space nerds out there, space talk is not stopping. So we'll get into it in a second.
Brokering success demands a battle-ready strategy. TIE TMS equips freight brokers with the ultimate battle station for conquering a tough market. With TIE, brokers gain access to a comprehensive platform where rate intelligence and quote history converge on a single screen. It's not just a page, it's a strategic command center designed to help brokers win. TIE equips your team with all of the data they need to negotiate with confidence and allows them to communicate directly with carriers and customers from a simple control base. Revolutionize the way your brokers perform by giving them a competitive advantage with TIE TMS. For more info, go to tai-software.com/battle stations, and we also have a link for you in the show notes to sign up for a demo.
I do want to say, for anyone that doesn't know who Samsara is, it's easiest way to kind of explain it to those in the space is it's a telematics company. It helps take all of the data that your company collects and visualizes it and creates solutions for you to make your operations work better and more efficient. So they're not just helping the trucking industry, but they help a lot in last mile. They help a lot in construction. Some of their biggest customers are actually like large crane companies and controlling and operating their assets. They're all over. Mostly Europe and the United States or North America, big actually in Mexico as well. And I won't lie, actually, I've known about Samsara for a while now, but I really haven't actually going through some of our articles. Noise written about them quite frequently, especially with a lot of the Mexico work that they're doing on focus rate on nearshoring. But I haven't myself got a chance to really dive into a lot of their technology. So they actually invited Freightwaves to host their podcast studio at the
Oh,
event.
that's cool.
Yeah, it was really cool. I mean, they built us a whole like glass studio like with
I saw your
soundproof.
photos from that. It looked
Yes.
awesome.
Yes, yeah. Oh, well, hide these because we'll get to this in a second. I got a fun story
Oh,
on the
so
space
ahead.
stuff for
Okay.
you. Yeah, but you guys got a sneak peek of it. But the other thing too is I don't think if you don't know, CMStar is also a public company. So part of this event was also the fact that it was their investor day. So not only is this a huge event for them to bring together their customers, but they bring together their partnerships with other technology companies that integrate into their tech that make their systems even more powerful. And they actually, it's the first event that I've ever gone to where the press and I think for the investor day aspect was like a big key component of it. Personally, I got to like hang out and ride around and spend a lot of close time with honestly some of our competition out there, Transport Topics, uh, CCJ, and a number of different media sources and analysts out there as well. And I'll get to the first day. We'll get to a little bit. I want to focus on. We did a field trip to one of their customers, but I'll get into that in a little bit when we get to more of our source to porch. But I will say, so it started off day one with a huge keynote with their CEO and CPO, product officer. Wonderful presentation. I'm sitting there and I'm like, the best way to explain it is like it was almost like watching like an Apple like product day, when they have like these huge like
Yeah.
announcements. It's the same thing. It was really great for someone who myself, I'm about to interview a ton of their partners and customers, and a good refresher for me to like see exactly what the company is doing and how many different ways they're helping their customers and just different outlets, right? Like it's not just trucking and transportation. A lot of what they do, right, is in construction, is it a number of cities, right? So like tracking like what was that big one, like the city of Denver, tracking their assets and their trucks for maintenance and things of that nature. And at some point they even like put up on the screen like what all the assets that they're tracking like in North America, and it just was really incredible to see like how many pings they're getting and et cetera. So a big part of that event as well, though, is and in that keynote was an announcement, a new tool that they're releasing, which is actually being sent out right now, millions of them to a number of their customers. And this was in Chicago, so like I will say shout out to the team for being creative. At one point, they're like, this is the hometown of Oprah, so all of you get to leave here with an asset tag, which is the tool that you get an asset tag and you get an. I was like, yes, we get fun stuff. So I actually have one. So they came out with this is the asset tag right here, and so
It's very small.
it's very small, like looks like a dark chocolate Milky Way. And what's really cool about
Like a
this is
fun size Milky Way.
yeah, oh yeah, it's like a fun size. And they purposely like built it so that you could attach it easily to like any type of surface.
Hmm.
Flat here, right? That way you can put in some screws here and call it a day. It's got the 4-year battery power
Oh, wow.
as well, which a good question came up, why 4 years? Which for them, and I would agree, especially the trucking side, like a lot of the assets that you're probably tracking, right? Like, are you tracking them more than 4 years before you replace them, things of that nature,
Oh,
which is
true.
like, if you think about the average like trailer, you're probably either swapping those out or buying new ones at some point. But it's funny because it's like you sit here and think, okay, like how cool is this thing? Like, what could this really do? But they started, and I talked to a number of customers there where it's like, um, I was talking to, actually did an interview with a man who's managing his fleet at an oil yard. And, he was saying the ability to put these on every single one of the trucks, but also, like, for instance, depending on the hazmat level of whatever they're moving, right? They might use a different truck over another one. So knowing exactly where that special truck is compared to others. Now, for the crane company, like different extensions, like they might not put this on the physical large crane that you see, but there might be a special extension onto that crane where they want to know where those assets are at all points in time. And how this thing works is any Samsara hardware system acts as a gateway. So as these are moving throughout the world, when they interact with a gateway, they get that ping, which is usually, like, if you're in a yard, it's easily going to be a gateway around you. They are working on an application for the phones, which sounded like it would come out in the next year or less. Where it's like, let's say I personally had the Samsara app on my phone. If a truck with one of these on it passes by me, that's a gateway. So that instantly that data is going to go back to whoever owns this thing and say, hey, we found your thing at this near Gray Sharkey. They won't say who I am, but in this exact area. So I thought it was really cool, and it was really interesting to hear all the different use cases from different industries on how something like this would be used. I think it's super practical. Like I said, yeah, it's super small. I mean, you could put this again, right? Like it's small enough that you could clearly put it on a truck. But even if I just
Put on a
wanted to,
pallet or something like.
I mean, yeah, 100%, or even just like some type of building equipment, right? Like heavy duty power
Oh
drills
wow,
and
yeah.
stuff like that. You could easily put that on there and be able to track it too. I was making a joke that now they can track all of us, but they're like, now they know where every single member of the conference is at every moment in time. But
So
yeah,
is that a working, like, can you use that device to track whatever you want?
technically, if I
Oh
set
wow.
up a Samsara account and activated it, I truly believe, like, not to throw it out there, but I think they could, like, literally track me right now. They don't know who it's attached to, right? But they
Yeah.
know this is sitting in my home right now in Michigan. So yeah, I think it's just, and it's like super lightweight, like it's nothing too crazy. And yeah, so it was cool to not only write about it, but again, like, be surrounded by people and talk to people. And you'll see content probably by the time this comes out. You'll see a couple of them. We took a lot of videos, a lot of interviews where we talked to people about how this could be used as well. Now, I will say, so again, event was amazing. They had different companies up on the stage explaining how they've used Samsara. And we'll actually, for the source report, we'll get into a little bit more too. But so, okay, so, I don't know if have you ever gone to a concert before, and maybe like the opener is someone that you love and you didn't expect them to be there. Like, you go to something and, like,
Yes.
oh, surprise, like, oh, your favorite. So I'm sitting there, right, and I'm in this keynote, I'm like enjoying myself, this thing's awesome, blah blah blah. And so they start talking about sending these to space. And so, chirp, chirp. I'm like, oh, space, what's going on? And they introduce, and it's so funny because we talked about this, and I never really looked at the other investors of the company, but all of a sudden they introduced Hubble Network. If you remember, we talked about Hubble on, like, the last episode or two episodes
Yeah.
ago. And so I start fangirling. I'm like, and they're like, hey, well, here comes Alex. And I'm like, yeah, oh my God, yeah. Like, I'm like, oh my God, like, this is my favorite company of all time right now. So I'm like, over in this corner, like the media side, like, yes, like telling South from Freightways, he's our producer. I'm like, I love this company. And so they were they're the reason they actually helped with Hubble's Series A, their seed
Mm.
round. And so they technically own a part of Hubble as well. So Alex from Hubble got on the stage. If you want to show up those videos, so now what they're doing is they're sending these up into space. So that way we can start pinging these as well. It's not happening yet, but this is what they're working on, using Bluetooth, which would make these accessible, this data accessible in parts of the world where there isn't a gateway, right?
Mm.
Or we're looking at areas that don't get cell service. And so they've done it already. That first one that went up in March, Samsara sent this up there with them too. And those pictures that you're showing earlier are, you can see the little tag on there, and they did get a signal from space. So yeah, it's really cool. And again, actually, it might come out earlier today or later today, but I will be putting out the interview where I think in the second picture I sent you, you can actually see the, yeah. So that's the little
Yeah,
thing on there.
yeah.
Yeah. And so
Well,
they,
it all makes sense.
yeah, and they got, and it's cool because at the event too, they right next to my booth. That was the best part. Right next to my booth, they had that satellite sitting there, and so
Isn't it so cool to see these things up close? Like,
yeah,
just the amount, and that's what just the space in general just feels like a bunch of different people from all different kinds of backgrounds from all over the world have to come together in order to make something like this happen on
yes,
Earth, then just send it out into space and hope and pray to God that it does work. I think it's
yeah,
super cool to see that, come to fruition. And then you can communicate with it like literally out in space. That
yeah,
it's just that never ceases to amaze me. But that's
yeah.
really cool. And if you're just listening, it's basically so this little like Milky Way like fun size shaped device that you can attach to almost like a flat panel, and that flat panel is part of the larger satellite system. Am I explaining
Yep,
that accurately?
exactly. Yep.
That's the right one.
There's the agenda. Exactly. So it's really cool. Again, they already sent it up there, and they had like that one that was in space sitting in the booth next to me. So like I was like, oh, I'm like, wow, this thing like went to space, dude. Like this is so cool. And they're actually, so I got to meet Alex at the Hubble Network as well, and they had a really great after event, dinner event at the Field Museum, which is
Oh,
like,
I saw those photos. It looked
yeah,
so cool. An event
yeah,
like at a museum, I think
yeah.
is, something that, conferences need to do more often.
Well, and I ran into this girl there, and we should either get on this show or I need to do some type of stuff with her. But she comes up to me and she goes, "Are you the girl in the box?" And I was like, at first I was like, I had to go drink or two. I'm like, what? I'm like, maybe like your TV. I guess so. Like, she's like, no, the girl at the event, like in the. I'm like, oh yeah, yeah, that's me. Yeah, yeah. I'm the animal in the zoo, and she was actually the product lead at Hubble. So I go,
Oh,
hashtag
wow.
women in STEM. Let's go. But her and I like nerded out about space for the longest, and she was talking to me about even when she, because I think she worked at NASA first, and they had heard about Alex working on this, and all of them were like, kind of like, yeah, that won't ever work. And if it did, the biggest thing is like, with that tool, how could you even make that tool accessible or cost efficient,
Hmm.
right? Like a lot of things are possible, but like, can you mass produce it? And she was explaining to me, like, there are Bluetooth that could technically talk in space, but they're just so expensive that
Hmm.
there's no, but taking an more average, like low, I think it's like a BLE, it's like a lower frequency Bluetooth. Um, if they could do that, but no one ever believed that they could.
Hmm.
So for her, it was fascinating kind of watching them prove this and show us this exists. And it's funny, we're kind of asking her questions about it, like, could technically our phones like attach to it? Now, a jailbroken phone technically could. Of
Hmm.
course, Verizon and Apple, they realized that would be way too easy, and they wouldn't make money off that. So they
Hmm.
do like put some blockages on there. It was interesting too, talking about like the cybersecurity of something like
Hmm.
that, right? Like, how do we, if it's make sure that stuff can't be, that data can't be taken from the wrong person or harmed in some type of way. So I want to try to get her on an episode. But yeah, it was cool. I was like, oh my god, I'm just literally talking about you guys. She's like, should you be our marketer? It's like, I probably should. Because I was just like fangirl. I was like, space, like let's talk. in the middle of like Dinosaur Central. So,
Which
yeah,
is just so, that's such a cool place to have that conversation.
right, 100%. And I just think it's just fascinating though to like consider, where we've gone in the last like 10 years as an industry from like where is this truck at to soon just being able to like literally put something as simple as this on it. Even other companies too. You think of companies like Tive, et cetera. That's like, there's ways that we can start actually tracking these assets and seeing where the stuff is. And also the next step moving forward, right, is like making them seen in areas where we don't get service and don't have an easy connection as we'd hope. So
Like
yeah,
true visibility, which is the
yeah,
main problem with a lot of visibility
real time.
platforms. Yeah,
Yeah,
is that you don't have, you have insights into maybe, warehousing and, cargo ships and containers and things like that, but from the truck aspect, it's still very challenging for, because what, more than 90% of all fleets, have 7 trucks or fewer, or even 5 trucks or fewer, I think is now the data point on that. And so for a lot of these owner operators or small carriers, they're not, they haven't invested in this. It's expensive probably
yeah.
to invest in that kind of like on the ground tracking. But that's when we will achieve like true visibility, is when the trucks are tracked. And to the much chagrin of, or chagrin, is that the right word? Chagrin, I guess, much to the annoyance of drivers that
Sure.
care about their privacy, things like that. But it is something that is coming because, some of these shipments are very expensive and worth a lot of money. And so people want to know where they're at, and tools like this help. And it's just, I don't know. It's so cool that they can do it from space.
Well, and it's what's really cool too is like it's not just about, at the end of the day all this is doing is collecting data, right? So
Hmm.
it's like, now what do we do with it? And that's what, well, I'll give it a little bit more later when we get to the source to port stuff. And I'm also kind of combining it with marketing as well and the Samsara's
Me too.
aspect. And you'll see it'll make sense when you talk about it. But like now, what do you do once we collect all this data? And that's what's really, that was the second part that I found interesting, was like, wow, like all these tools now that they're creating, and then including these partnerships, like for instance, there's insurance companies there, right, that can plug into Samsara and say, oh, okay, well, you want to be insured for going into California, but we notice that you only go into California like twice a year, so maybe we can change your plan up, right,
Hmm.
to so that's where it gets a little bit more interesting. It's not just about what does Samsara's like system do just on the user interface, which was incredible, but once you start connecting some of these really cool extra tools, right? What can the world look like for your company? So yeah, it was really, I really truly enjoyed it. And then at the end of the day too, my good friend from Michigan State University, Magic Johnson, was there, and boy, uh, if you're a company that's looking for a credible speaker for an event, that man did. And I'm trying not to be biased, but just an
And he's a
incredible,
Michigan State grad. You're a Michigan
yeah.
State
Well,
grad. I
he's
saw your video where you did a little, what is it, go
yeah.
green,
Oh,
and
go
then
reading. I had to. But like just in terms of like him, like he understands his fandom, like and talk about his, oh my god, talk about his businesses. I had no, do you know that his company feeds both Disneyland and Disney World employees? Like he is the main food provider
oh
for the
wow.
employees at both those locations. Yeah.
Hmm.
Also, he's they're like signing American Airlines now, but all the food in Delta and Delta Sky Club, Magic Johnson.
Oh
He
wow.
was like listing off all this stuff. I'm like, what? I had no idea. I'm like, and it was funny. He was telling a story about how when he was up playing against, I can't remember what year it was, what ring it was, but he was playing against Michael Jordan, and MJ was like, "Hey man, like, just want to let you know, it must have been the first ring. So I just want to let you know, like, we're gonna beat you guys, and we're gonna take this thing." And he's like, Michael, at the end of the day, I win both ways. And he was like, "What are you talking about?" And he goes, "Well," and Michael had this shirt on that had like Michael's face on the front and back of it, kind of like a cartoon-esque shirt. And he's like, "Well, you go ahead and tell me what's on that tag." And he like pulls his shirt off, and it's Magic Johnson tees. He's like, "Worst case, I'll sell a bunch of Michael Jordan shirts." So it's like he's always, and at that point, he was the only athlete that had licensing rights from the NBA. So
Oh, wow.
the story of like his businesses is thrilling. He talking about he owns like a couple of esports teams.
Hmm.
He said it's the most lucrative like a sports team that he owns. Like every player on their team is making at least $3 million a year.
Jeez.
And he was like, for all you parents out there whose kids are big gamers, like do not tell them to get off the video game. And if anything, like find a way for them to market their expertise. So like get on Twitch or something, because these kids are making tons of money.
And it's big time events. Like they're selling out
Yeah.
arenas. There's
Yeah.
a former producer of Freightways, I think her name is Luglo. I don't know if you ever worked
Yeah,
with her.
yeah.
But she now works for a big like
Oh,
esports
really?
company, and she travels around to, different cities where they host these tournaments. And so she was, doing production and TV and stuff for Freightwaves. Now she's doing production and TV
Wow.
on site for these big like esports events. I've been meaning to get her on the show to talk about what all goes into
Yeah.
that. But it's a big deal. So it's cool to hear that he is, he's number one at an event like this. So he's obviously an investor in this kind of, technology, but then he's also investing in like, what do they say? Like be the person who sells the shovels during the gold rush.
Yes. Yeah.
And so he's, providing the shirts and providing the food to infrastructure that already exists, which is pretty cool.
He said his construction company or something that he part owns just did the update to JFK, and now he's like working on they won the some $1 billion contract for LAX too or something like that. And I'm like, this guy doesn't basketball lame. But in terms of like audience engagement too, like he was just pulling people up. Like this one guy's cell phone like goes off, like someone's calling him. He's like, let me answer it. He's like, hey. So he's like, he knows how to work a crowd, and it was just and knew people wanted pictures and made sure they got them. And I will say a woman did ask him too if he had to choose a one-on-one game, LeBron versus Michael. Michael without a doubt. He didn't even hesitate on that one. So,
a man of taste.
Yeah, exactly. So I loved it as a state fan. It was great, and I think it was the last thing of the whole event too. So it left you on this kind of like, wow, this like partnership networking, like what that all can grow into if you work.
That's interesting. It's interesting that they had him speak last, because then usually that's quite the opposite when it comes to events or conferences.
They get people there too, right?
Right, because they know you want to see him, and so end the conference on a high note, and then you're talking about it to all your colleagues, and on a show like this, and hopefully, is it open to the public for something like this, or it's probably like invite only?
It is. I think it technically was open to the public. Like you could buy a ticket. But that's the other thing too. Like it wasn't like just a free user conference. Like everyone paid to be there, and so that was just. I mean, I had like 2,000 people. It was huge. Yeah, I know. That's not. I mean, I honestly kind of walked in and was like, it's a crowd of people that I don't often get to see. I
expected maybe a few hundred for it's almost like a user conference type level, but. God, 2,000. That's awesome.
Yeah, it was huge. I will say, if I had one regret, it's not about the event. The Stones were playing at Soldier Field.
Rolling Stones?
Yeah.
And wow.
If you know the infrastructure of Chicago, it's literally right across from Field Museum. Like, I'm talking like 800 steps maybe. And we almost went to the Stones concert, and I kind of wish we would have. But shout out to Andrew for sushi for dinner. That turned out fine. But we almost did. We were very close. It was a beautiful Chicago. Chicago. This is the time of year you go to Chicago. It's nice, 70, 80 degrees, beautiful, nice wind off the lake. So it's a perfect time. And it sounds like they'll be doing it again next year in San Diego. So we'll see if we get invited again.
Heck yeah. Well, invite your girl too. I've never been to San Diego, so I would love to visit. So
it's all right.
It's just all right.
I don't know. I've only been to the West Coast twice, and San Diego is one of those. It's It's fine. You know me. Oceans.
You're a Midwest truther.
I will say San Diego is kind of cool though because there's a big naval base there. So like when you're on the beach, like you get to just watch the cool planes like come in and out the whole time.
Oh, that's
cool.
Like,
if you like rockets going off, you like it too.
Well, apparently Russia is sending some, submarines and planes over to Cuba. So Southern Florida is at least getting
that. Yeah.
All of a sudden, the U.S. government decides they want to do military practices in South Florida. So I have seen some footage of like all of the major jets, B-2 bombers, like just going up and down the coast of Florida. So there's a little bit of a little bit of bravado.
Throwback Thursday to Cold War. Let's go.
Great. Love living here. We're gonna be the first targets.
Yeah. Just when you thought Florida couldn't get better.
Luckily, I'm in the northern part, so they kind of forget about us. It's from Orlando down.
They're for sure forgetting about the large port in your city. That's for sure.
Right, and the large naval base. And 2 naval bases, I think.
In Tallahassee. Tallahassee is who they would mess with. It's basically Alabama at that point. I
don't even know why. I'm gonna stop because I was about to be like, I don't even know why we have our capital in Tallahassee. I have zero clue why.
Wow, that's where your capital is.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, that's.
I have no idea why.
I assume they're like at some point this whole thing will fall off. So
so we'll stay
as possible.
All right, well, let's get into let's shift gears a little bit because if you were listening to the previous episode, we talked about tugboats and barges, and we also talked about what we would be discussing on future episodes. And so I think we talked about icebreakers that we're going to do in future episodes. I'm not sure what, maybe the other ones I'm blanking on what we had mentioned, but one of those topics was also shipping canals.
Yes.
And so we thought that we would shine a little bit of a light on the different and major shipping canals all over the world. And I think for most folks, you are used to like the Suez Canal. That's the one that Egypt owns. That is it's been, I'll just go through my notes right now. It was opened in 1869. It's a critical maritime route, or has been a critical maritime route for over 150 years. And the significance of it is that it reduces the maritime journey between Europe and Asia by about 4,300 miles. I was going to mention kilometers, but I don't know what a kilometer is. And, it's, day before July 4th. So we are going to go with miles.
Yeah, for sure.
What the fuck is a kilometer?
Yeah, what is a kilometer, the world?
But nearly 10% of global trade passes through the Suez Canal, including 12% of the world's total oil shipments. I could also go through the Panama Canal, but I wanted to show this quick video first. So let me bring up Grace's favorite platform. And that's the Suez Canal. Hopefully you didn't hear that volume, but let me go ahead and hit play on this one. Oh, I got to add it to the stage first. So some BTS for you guys. Here's an overview of the Suez Canal from this TikTok user, Novasphere2.
Here is the Suez Canal, one of the busiest shipping channels in the world, and also one of the most profitable canals. The Suez Canal was initially excavated by the French, but the British later became the major shareholders. After Egypt gained independence, they consistently sought control of the canal and eventually succeeded in ousting the British. As one of the busiest shipping channels globally, the Suez Canal witnesses tens of thousands of vessels passing through every year. It brings significant economic benefits to Egypt, serving as a vital financial pillar for the country. Reports estimate that around 23,000 ships transit the canal annually, generating approximately $8 billion in toll revenue. This means an average daily income of around $22 million and an average toll fee of $350,000 per ship passing through the canal. Today, 70% of oil tankers and cargo ships worldwide navigate through the Suez Canal. It has become a crucial trade route between Asia and Europe, given the substantial costs involved in detouring around the southern tip of Africa, the Cape of Good Hope. Egypt seems to be making money hand over fist, lying back and enjoying the benefits.
Which is actually, when you think about any fun facts that you got about the Suez Canal?
Not about the Suez, but it's, apparently, like, we've had canals. We've been using canals. One thing I saw was since Mesopotamia times, which, if you're a
Oh, wow.
history buff, that's yeah, we're talking thousands of years BC, before the guy that a lot of people believe in. So it's to make BC politically correct. But no, it's that's crazy. I didn't realize how much money they're making off of that
And
too.
the toll fees, I think, is what's I'm like, wow, what a great opportunity
Yeah,
for just, I don't know, just
I wish
existing,
I wish
like
I'd like to see that.
controlling the canal.
I'd like to see that, like, P&L, though, because I'm assuming the upkeep of a canal isn't the cheapest thing either. So, like, again, people who might not understand businesses, like, just don't think that they're bringing $22 million and that's their profit. I just assume there's got to be some cost, or else, like, I mean, Egypt is but they've also had some instability issues. So, but that's great. And so I was going to say the lock aspect of it. So I was going to say you can have canals, and then there's some, right, that do have the lock aspect, which we see here a lot in Michigan. We have the Sioux locks, the Sioux Canal, and the Sioux locks up in the UP.
Hmm.
Whereas then there's also, like, the Erie Canal, which is more closer to Toledo, Detroit area, but that doesn't have locks either. But um, interesting. No, I didn't
Yeah,
really.
I had it on my, so I'll play that video next on the, well, maybe I could play it now with the Erie Canal, because in my notes it says it opened in 1825, so it was one of the first,
Yeah.
like, shipping canals in the United States. I think it
Is
was the first, but it played a pivotal role in economic development of the United States in the 19th century. It reduced transportation costs by about 95%, significantly boosting trade and settlement in the Midwest. And it spans 363 miles, connecting the Hudson River in Albany to Lake Erie
Oh,
in
wow.
Buffalo. So
So
I
there must
don't
be
think.
some lock at some point then with the.
Well, here, I'll bring this video up now since we're talking about it, and then we'll get into the Panama Canal next, which is probably, I think, for United States residents, probably the most famous one. So Suez and Panama. So I'll play this video now too, and this is on the Erie Canal, and this comes from Legends and Lores over on TikTok. Oh wait, I gotta actually share the screen.
Beautiful.
It's flawless production level here. Can you tell we're ready for vacation?
America's greatest engineering feats was completed in 1825. The Erie Canal, stretching 363 miles from Albany to Buffalo, was a groundbreaking project that transformed the nation. Before the canal, transporting goods from the interior to the port cities was costly and time-consuming. The canal drastically reduced transportation costs and time, fueling economic growth and westward expansion. Its construction was an immense challenge, requiring innovative solutions such as the use of hydraulic cement. The success of the Erie Canal led to the boom of cities like Syracuse and Rochester, turning New York City into the nation's principal port. It also spurred a canal-building frenzy, with numerous other canals constructed across the country. The Erie Canal wasn't just a marvel of engineering, it was a symbol of American ingenuity and ambition, reshaping the landscape and economy in profound ways. Today, it remains a testament to the transformative power of infrastructure.
So that's the Erie Canal.
AI made TikTok videos so much better, huh?
I know, it's about time you get on it.
All those AI images, I'm like, wow. Well,
it does make my sort of the wheels turn in my brain, like, oh, maybe I don't have to go and do hair and makeup every time I go on screen, and I could just write these scripts myself and not have to be a faceless
the next
channel
episode
instead.
is like just straight AI us. It's like not even, we don't even do it.
Oh God, that'll be the dream, to be honest.
That's incredible. Yeah, it's so crazy too to think, like, the time period that a lot of this stuff was built, and how long it's stayed.
I think, with all of our space discussions too, it's interesting to see how this exact sort of infrastructure, not exact, but this same exact, not exact again, is being built in space now. So we're developing these different like trade lanes and trade routes to space, very similar to how they were developed in the U.S. and just across like human history. So here is the next video on how the Panama Canal works. Well, first, let me give you a little bit of an overview with the Panama Canal. I'm sure maybe well, the video I'm going to show is how the Panama Canal actually works, because it's different from other canals across the globe. But the Panama Canal opened up in 1914. It contributes nearly $2 billion annually to Panama's economy, and it shortens the route for shipping, saving around 8,000 nautical miles for ships traveling between the east and the west coast of the Americas. And so obviously the Panama Canal is vitally important to shipping goods into the US, so much so that because the US kind of controls the majority of the Panama Canal, or probably all of it, China was at one point in talks with Nicaragua in order to build a new canal. That those talks have stalled, but they were going to build a new canal in Nicaragua that China was going to control most of it and fund most of it. So that did not happen. So the Panama Canal is still the number one, probably greatest importance for the U.S. So let me play this video on how the canal actually works. And I'm sorry if you're just listening, but hopefully it still kind of comes through okay. But if not, you can go check out this video over on YouTube. And this video comes from energy.sector8 over on TikTok.
Really goes. Wow.
So if you were just listening, basically what that video is showing is that the ship, once the cargo ship comes up into the canal, I think it's the lock system. Is that where very similar to the lock system of what you were just talking about? Yep. So it goes almost like into a giant pool. They fill up the pool with the water, and then they shift them over to the next sort of lock step. So they go through like 3 processes of this to get into the canal. Then they go through the canal, and then they go back through almost the same sort of section where they put the ship in a certain section. These walls go up, water is filled up or dropped down, and you move section by section. So people might have heard of like the drought problems that the Panama Canal had suffered earlier this year. And so when they don't have that water, they can't have that that different fluctuations of pumping water in, draining the water out, and doing that series of processes for each ship that goes through. I think that's one of the bigger complaints with the Panama Canal and really I think the Suez Canal is only one ship can really go through at a time. You can't have multiple ships, going north and south or east and west at the same time. So that's the only sort of downfall or con of the Panama Canal, is that you can't have 2 ships going at once, very similar to the Suez Canal. But any fun facts about the Panama Canal you got?
Well, the one thing I'm thinking about too is I'm pretty sure now that they've expanded it as well, because what they call like a Panamax ship. So it's like cargo ships that are now so wide, and I believe Rachel Premack wrote about it a while ago, right? I think it was during her big ships. Yes, that they actually had to expand in order to make those work. So that's I think an interesting point there. The other thing I was considering too is I'm glad you brought up the drought. I think especially that visual kind of shows you like how important that water is to that system, right? So if there is a fall, you can imagine how much slower it's going to take to get those through. Now, a fun fact, for a while, up until I want to say last year, Disney cruise ship paid the highest toll to date. This was in 2008 to go through the Panama Canal, and that was $330,000.
Wow.
Now, if you are a Freightways fan, then you probably remember though in November of last year, because the line was so long, people were paying higher tolls to jump the line. It was a Japanese container ship, if I remember right, had paid $9 million to jump the line as well. So a little bit more. And I can't imagine that price. If I remember correctly, though, with that Japanese ship, it had some type of product that had an expiration date. So it was one of those things where it's like, if we don't get through this line, like everything on this boat or majority
Oh,
of what's on
wow.
this boat will expire. So it wasn't just like we had the money, let's pay it and just send the tax over. Another fun fact, and I thought this was interesting as someone who loves the water. In 1928, a man named Richard Halliburton, he was like an inventor or something.
Halliburton?
Yeah, not I don't think related to that Halliburton.
Okay.
Swam the full length of the Panama Canal.
Oh, wow.
Now, any
I didn't
vessel
know
that
you could
goes,
swim it.
yeah, I guess you can. Now, any boat that goes through it, you have to pay a toll, and it's based on your weight. Well, Halliburton had to do the same thing, and so his toll, and again, 1928, so it's probably a little higher now. He ended up having to pay 36 cents to go through it. So if you are going to swim the Panama Canal, make sure
Did he have to go through the different, locking
I would assume
systems?
so, yeah. Which is
Oh,
like
that
kind
must
of
have been cool.
scary. Like to think about that, like you're just like rising with the tide. I mean, they go like at least the ones I've been through, they go very slow. So it's not like you're just like all of a sudden up. It's like very
like a gradual process.
Yeah, and that was a small one, so I would assume even bigger it feels even slower. So yeah, that's I like the Panama. There's a lot of interesting history. I mean, it's not the most it's definitely not the safest history if you look back at it, but Teddy Roosevelt, I believe, started it, and very interesting president in terms of infrastructure and
national parks.
Yeah, 100%. So, and then to see the back and forth aspect. So yeah, if you ever get a chance, like just look up the history of like ownership of it, because
I think too there was one like interesting fact about. I mean, obviously this is like a terrible part of history, but there were a lot of workers, slavery going on with building the Panama Canal. But for a lot, I think of like the white workers, they were falling sick to malaria. And for whatever reason, the slaves that they had brought over from Africa were surviving it.
Wow.
And so I want to say that's like a lot of like the locals in the area were falling sick to malaria, but meanwhile they found a cure, or not a cure, but a way to fix malaria and where it was coming from, because of the slaves that came over and were also, constructing, obviously not willingly, the Panama Canal, and they weren't dying. And so it was the locals that were dying from it, if I remember that story correctly, which is, I don't know if it's like a good thing or a bad thing, but it was a thing that happened. Okay, so another one that I wanted to talk about is, so we've talked about like the famous canals, but then I also wanted to know, like, well, what other, I would have thought that like a lot of canals have already kind of been constructed, that like, we don't really like, is construction really happening on new canals? It turns out they are. So I found a couple videos of like the new canal constructions that are going on across the globe, because if you think about from the none of that is happening in the United States, because we have, the inland waterways. And we talked about it briefly on the last episode of just the power of the inland waterways. It starts at the Mississippi River and it goes up north. And then you have all of these different outposts that go into, sort of the Midwest, but then also into reaching into some of the West Coast. That comes all off the Mississippi River. And so when you can go through the Panama Canal and you can ship your freight over to the New Orleans port, then you can put it on a barge and put it up a barge and send it up the Mississippi River. Like that is an extreme competitive advantage. And also from not just from a military perspective, but also just from, just supplies in general. And that's really how the dominance of the United States is, that we have oceans on each side of us, but then we also have the Mississippi that allows for that transportation process to take place. Well, China is actually building that same thing, because if you look at a map of China, especially population maps, the overwhelming majority of the population, I want to say like 80% of the population, all lives on the eastern coast of China. So they have rural areas that are, obviously in the, central and western parts of China, but most of the population all lives on the east coast. So now they're trying to change that by building a new canal that will hopefully alleviate some of that shipping stress, and almost make like a little bit of like a model of like our inland waterways, just doing it for the Chinese population and also, countries like Vietnam. So I'm going to play this video from Futurology Shorts that's going to talk about that new canal that's being built.
China has begun construction on a $10.5 billion canal called the Pinglu Canal. Located in southern China, it will stretch 135 kilometers, linking the Xi River with ports in the Beibu Gulf, providing a faster route for inland goods to reach the sea. This will provide major economic benefits, while also opening up a new waterway for trade with Asian countries. The project, which is China's first new canal in over 70 years, is planned to finish in 2027. Do you think the Pinglu Canal is a good idea? Let us know in the
So that's the Pengaloo Canal that is going on, or the construction that is going on. Like the video said, it's opening up in 2027. Another country that is building a new canal or planning to build a new canal is Turkey. And so over in Turkey, they're kind of trying to do the same thing where they already have a canal that is within the country, but I think they have a lot of, similar problems where it's, you can't fit two ships, and there's a lot of, like, obviously any kind of canal, especially like Egypt knows this with the Suez Canal. There's also geopolitical tensions, who controls the canals, who gets to collect the tolls. So there's that aspect of things too. So let me play this video from the same company, Futurology.Shorts, where it talks about the construction of the new canal in Turkey.
Turkey is planning to build a 45-kilometer-long canal across Istanbul, uniting the Mediterranean and Black Seas. The project, which would divert traffic away from the highly congested Bosphorus Strait, would cost $20 billion, generating massive revenues while establishing new ports and transforming Western Istanbul into an island. In addition, it would bypass the Montreux Convention, allowing NATO naval vessels access into the Black Sea, infuriating Russia.
Yikes. So, I mean, obviously there's some geopolitical tensions from that aspect. But I thought that was really interesting to know about the new canals that are being built. And then, obviously China had plans to build a canal in Nicaragua. That is not happening, but there was a lot of environmental concerns around that happening, because you think about all the animals that are going to be displaced, the massive, I mean, it took like 100 years for the Panama Canal to be constructed. And so for a lot of these construction projects, it's like, especially for a lot of different governments, like, how long are these governments going to, be
see
around?
how quickly China gets theirs up and running. Yeah.
Exactly. Now there is another canal that may happen in Thailand. So it is, I don't want to even try to pronounce this, so I'm just going to spell it, KRA Isthmus Canal proposal. It's a potential route that would cut through the Kira, God, I am not going to pronounce this right, but KRA ISTHMUS in Thailand.
Yeah, you're right.
Isthmus, creating a direct link between the Andaman Sea and the Gulf of Thailand. So that one could potentially reduce shipping times and costs by bypassing the congested Malacca Strait, one of the world's busiest maritime routes. So thought that was that was I don't know. You kind of think of canals that, like, they've just always been there, like the Suez and the Panama. Like, I had no idea that new canals were being built.
Yeah, I especially like that large of like trade routes, right? Like that's interesting. It's like you just assume, I don't know, I just assume that we had figured out all the places to put one.
Right.
Like, like, but also I guess
why haven't we figured this out yet?
Yeah, 100%. That's interesting.
All right, cool. Well, that I think that does it, unless you have anything else for the canal part.
I do have a canal that I think kicked off this, and I sent a video to you. You might see it in an email I sent over earlier. But there's an interesting canal, and this is more of the technology of the canal in particular, not so much. It's light trade. It's mostly, I think, tourism trade in particular. But there's a canal called the Falkirk Wheel. It's in Scotland. It actually replaced a series of 11 locks that connected two canals together. And it can facilitate movement of boats between two canals that are actually at very different heights, about 24. So, like, if it were a lock, we're looking at it going 24 meters up, and you're up meters, so we got to deal with that. But it's really interesting because it in the video that I sent. You might see it right before we started the video, or this. I think I sent it 9:32 or something like that.
Is it this video?
Let's see.
The Falkirk Wheel?
Yes.
Scotland?
So he's going to explain kind of the technology behind it and how it like self-powers itself, basically, in a way. But yeah, if you want to play that, it's kind of interesting.
Okay, this video comes from Tom Scott over on YouTube, so I'm going to hit play on this.
This is the Falkirk Wheel, and it's one of the greatest bits of modern industrial design in the world. On the top of that hill is the Union Canal, and down here is the Forth and Clyde Canal. And the traditional way to get boats between them was a flight of locks, which would take about a day to get through, and besides, they were dismantled here in the 1930s. The solution? The world's only rotating boat lift. Now, boat lifts aren't a new thing.
Oh, wow.
They've been around for centuries. Most of them, like this, have two caissons, which is the technical term for the tubs that the boats sit in. Although usually they're next to each other rather than rotating around a central point. And the reason for two is this. To lift 500 tons of water 24 meters up, you need a minimum of 32 kilowatt hours of power. That's about what an average British house uses in 3 days, or an average American house in 1 day. And that's before friction. That's just the potential energy you need to put into the system to raise it up that far. But if you're also having the same weight of water descend at the same rate, at the same time, then you're not adding any potential energy at all. On average, nothing is going up or down. You're just getting a really heavy thing moving and then stopping it again. Because of that, this wheel only needs 1.5 kilowatt hours for one lift, less than a 20th of what it'd need otherwise. There are even some boat lifts in the world powered entirely by gravity, where local conditions and the architecture permit it. You just fill the top one with a bit more water, let it go, and then apply the brakes when you need to. Bit tricky with something that's as fancy as this, though. It has to be massively reinforced, and there is an incredible amount of momentum involved. And here's the really clever bit. Remember Archimedes' principle, the Greek bloke with the bathtub? A floating object displaces an amount of water equal to its weight. An object that sinks, sure, that displaces equal to volume, but a floating object, like a boat, displaces water equal to its weight. When they're full of water, those caissons weigh about 500 tons. You add 10 tons of floating boat to one of them, then 10 tons of water flows out into the canal, which means this is balanced no matter how much is actually floating in it.
So it's basically like a Ferris wheel for boats in a canal.
Yeah, and it is interesting, like the science behind it, right? Like, it's the way that floating object displaces itself. It's like it'll always be balanced no matter what. So it's like it doesn't matter if there's a heavier boat on one side than the other. It'll displace the amount of water, so will weigh the same amount, which is, I think, really interesting. So, yeah, that one is actually, if I remember correctly, we got to thank good old Queen Elizabeth II, our past queen, former queen.
R.I.P.
R.I.P.
We lost the real one.
We lost a real one.
Even though it's the day before July 4th, still mad respect for the late queen.
By the way, at the Samsara event, there's a group of British guys that I was diving into, and they just think it's so crazy that we are so obsessed with them here. And they could care less. It's we're having, it's just like guilt issues from when we left you guys, but so yeah, Queen Elizabeth opened that in 2002, I believe, and it is actually more known for a tourist attraction than it is for more of the supply chain aspect of it, but yeah, I think it's kind of cool. Just
Yeah, that's really
nice
cool. I
design.
imagine the maintenance on that thing has got to be intense from
Right.
just a ongoing perspective, because I mean, it's just an incredible amount of weight that but if you're doing it from that engineering perspective where they're balancing and they're counterbalancing each other out, and you're not losing any power or very minuscule amount of power relative to the kinds of things you're doing. It's
Levers,
pretty cool.
pulleys. We
Yeah.
all remember that stuff, right? That was like my favorite part of science. That was like the only thing that made sense to me. I'm like, yeah, totally, totally.
Man,
Uh,
yeah, it's pretty cool to see this, just I guess construction of it, that we can almost like play God to an extent of, if there
well,
isn't a way through, we can just either blow it up and, construct it in a way that we can
that was the
force
first
the
thing I
way
thought when I
through.
saw it was like, okay, this one probably uses way less dynamite. Like that's what I was like. That was my first thought was like, oh, okay, we don't need to. I think what did it say on here? How much dynamite? I think it was. So yeah, we don't need 60 million pounds of dynamite like we needed the Panama
Such a
Canal to build
British
this
thing to
thing.
say. We don't need weapons.
Yeah,
We don't need to bomb anything.
yeah, exactly. We'll just build these
We'll just stage
really
coups
cool.
and
Yeah,
colonize the world. That's all. Using naval
exactly.
ships instead.
Shh, no one remembers, right? Always remember. Oh,
All right. Well, let's shift gears a little bit, because we got about 30 minutes left before we both have to hit the road for
yes.
July 4th festivities. Here we are working for you guys and gals the day before a holiday when most people have their out of office already on. So we're going to get into a little bit of freight marketing, favorite freight business, and also source to porch, which I think we're going to combine both of us into one.
Yeah.
So I would say maybe you.
Yeah.
Wait, I'll do my freight marketing, then you do yours, and it'll go right into. Yeah, I think that's probably a good thing. So I'll just do mine real quick. So favorite freight marketing, if you're new to this segment, we'd like to pay attention to, the things that are going on in the logistics space and who's doing a good job of it, and maybe who's not. This is mostly like a positive segment, so I don't think we've focused on any, negative freight marketing stories, although we could. That might be fun in the future, especially if you're using European trucks in your American marketing. But for the positive side of things, I want to talk about green screens, because green screens, they do a really good job of marketing their company to the point where it's really like their internal subject matter experts are, pumping out regular content that they make themselves, that looks really good. And it also is a lot of like valuable data and insight. And so what maybe a lot of people don't know what they do is they also have a media newsletter that goes out regularly, that they send to different podcasters, creators, subject matter experts, things like that, where they include their data as sort of like a wrap-up report. So I just got added to this list, and I saw it for the first time, and it was one of those things where it was like, oh, that's great, I can't wait to read this, and you bookmark it to come back for later. But I just, I hadn't gotten around to it. I'm in email hell right now after going
Yeah.
to the TMSA conference, and then I got the NASA trip. I feel like I'm still playing catch up. But one of the things, and to, I guess, sort of bring it full circle, is while I was at TMSA, I was talking to Kara Brown. She's the CEO of Lead Coverage, and she was mentioning like all of this sort of like intent data and how to help marketers sort of learn the math behind marketing. And she mentioned the stat that it takes 35 touch points now. We used to say 7 touch points for someone to see your ad or to see your company in order to make a conversion. That number has now drastically increased to 35 touch points. And so she's measuring these things, like her team is measuring these things for different clients. And it's different touch points, as in it's not just an ad, it's not just an email newsletter, but it's also social media and all of these other different touch points that you can have with your potential customer. And so I got that green screens email. I bookmarked it. I said, I'm going to come back and read this. Can't wait to. But then I went scrolling on LinkedIn, because you kind of forget, when you bookmark things, like, and you just go to the distraction places. And so to LinkedIn, and I'm looking at LinkedIn, and I'm seeing a couple of like their internal like executives also tweeting out or posting out, not tweeting, posting out to LinkedIn a lot of this same information, but in their own voice. And so I thought that it was like a full circle moment where, I had already previously signed up for this email from Green Screens. I already think that they do great marketing. And then to hear Kara Brown talking about those 35 different touch points of what you have to have with your customer, and then seeing it happen in real life, I think was kind of like a full circle moment for me. But their executive team started using this same market intelligence, the same market insight, and using it for their social media posts. And so just to share, if you want to take sort of like a visual of like their market trends, because I believe that you can just go right on to the main Green Screens website in order to see. Yeah, you can. And so it's greenscreens.ai/market trends. And they do this for every month. I think it's very akin and very similar to like what FreightWaves does with their quarterly, market updates. I think they also do monthly as well. But just to be able to see like this in a visual format. So they have the landing page on the website. They have the email that goes out to subject matter experts, whether you're inside of Green Screens or outside of Green Screens. And then they have their executive team talking about it on social media. So I'll link to that Kara Brown episode in the show notes in case you want to hear more about that 35 touch points. But if you thought 7 was enough historically, it's no longer enough. You have to do this in a variety of different platforms, a variety of different distribution methods. So seeing that hearing that phrase, the 35 touch points, and then seeing it in action, whether consciously or unconsciously with the 35 touch points coming from Green Screens, I thought that was really cool to see in the wild. And then also think about, well, how can I take, sort of a long form interview or a long form conversation like this and turn it into multiple different touch points that you can get more longevity out of your content? Because obviously, what I just showed is a lot of market intelligence, a lot of graphics, and that takes a little while to put that kind of stuff together. And so you don't want to put it together and then forget about it or tweet it out once or post it once. You want to do it a lot. You want to do it 30 times. So that's my freight marketing segment. So yeah.
No, that's a good one. Mine is actually going to be a mix of both marketing and a little play on marketing and source to port as well. So going back to the Samsara event, day one, the event was technically Thursday and Friday, but on day one, they invited all of the reporters and analysts to actually go on a fun field trip to one of their local customers in Chicago, which is Farmer's Fridge. Have you ever heard of this company before?
Mm-mm.
When you're at the airport and you see those salads, pre-made salads, like in the vending machines.
Yeah.
That's the company we're talking about. If you Google it, I wanted to say I'm saying it right. Farmer's Fridge, right? Mm-hmm. Yes. And so not only do they have they're also in like Hudson's, a lot of airports in particular, and there's like some other type of buildings that they're in. But we got to go to see them directly because they're actually a customer of Samsara. They use Samsara for their final mile deliveries with their drivers. And the reason I bring this up is marketing, because it was a really great way, I think, for the press to actually see a company in action. See those. You probably see those vending machines at like local airports and stuff.
So it's like
that.
a jar. I have seen these. So it's like a jar with all of the salad toppings in it and put in a way that's very like obviously like Instagram aesthetic.
Yeah.
But so your salad doesn't get soggy either.
Exactly.
Whenever you get this.
It is all fresh. Like apparently for like they're headquartered in Chicago, and they get a lot of the foods and everything sourced near their like packaging unit. We went to their physical office, not their like packaging warehouse or anything. But they have 32 hours from the moment that's packaged to get them to, at the very latest, to like, for instance, LA's airport, right?
Wow.
Yeah. So they not only do they use Samsara tools and hardware for, of course, the refrigerated aspect, the temperature aspect, but they use it to actually track all of their drivers and any issues that might arise on their transit. Like For instance, if there is a hard braking incident, they'll get actually they've connected Samsara to their Slack account.
Hmm.
So, like individuals who are in charge of watching over the driver's habits and things of that nature will get a Slack notification that so and so's had a hard break, so they can immediately go in, watch the footage. And it was really cool because the guys are talking about like they're not just there to like watch the drivers, like make sure they're doing good, but like a lot of times in those situations they'll call the driver like, hey, we just saw this guy cut you off, is everything okay? And the driver's like, wow, like no one ever calls me to make sure I'm okay, and like has them, oh, go ahead, pull over, you have enough time to still make your delivery, pull over, take a breather, and feel free to get back on the road. But they like Samsara's cameras will catch like if they are falling asleep at all, if they're looking at their phones, all this different type of behavior. So it's not only just, are we hiring the best drivers, and they can see them like in an instance on a map. So the reason I bring this up is because, again, for marketing purposes, this did a really incredible job. Oh yeah, see, so they have to deliver to all these locations
There's so many.
Yeah, within 30 hours of everything being packaged, right? And I just thought, as a journalist, it was really cool to like get there and hear from a customer directly. And this goes back to like, I don't know why we don't see more of this, or sometimes it's like hidden, like you're afraid to showcase your customer. But for tech companies out there, like, get your customers involved. Like, they had built a really incredible partnership. I think they were on like way over 5 years of working together. And throughout that had built like custom tools together as well, which was really cool to hear about. I mean, even that Slack feature was something that they worked together to make sure worked appropriately. And that's what I thought was interesting, is like, you're not only going to get a view of like how this company works as a partner, but like how their systems are actually being used in real time and real actual use cases. So I enjoyed the trip. It was fun to get out to Chicago and like see a local company as well. And we also got free food, so that was awesome. uh, and the team there was really cool. And of course, it's Chicago, so that one of those cool like downtown hip like uh, big tall ceilings, brick type of like headquarters and stuff. But it was just really cool to see. I mean, the technology behind it too, and making sure that, I mean, see that tablet right there? Like, I'm guaranteed that's probably Samsara. If you scroll up a little bit, that guy like refilling and using, like, I guarantee that's probably Samsara's technology that he's using there to make sure it's stocked appropriately and has
That's
everything
cool.
in there. But yeah, they have daily deliveries, and allows them to better track their drivers and make sure that, of course, everything is delivering fresh to those locations. And so yeah, for instance, to throw something out there, like if you are a local Chattanooga company, or you work with companies in Chattanooga and you're going to F3, like, consider an event where, like, after our daily stuff, before we do the fun like concerts, like doing a quick field trip with individuals to a local customer and showcasing like what your tech is actually doing, because it hit for me much better, like how well it was working in different ways that you can use your technology than just like, here's a white paper, right? Like the
Yeah.
visual concept, the hearing from the owner of Farmer's Fridge, and how their tech has helped them scale, was just much more powerful than like any blog that anyone could put together. So that's the creative part to me. And then source to porch, it was incredible to hear about how something like salad, like I just had dinner with my parents like last. My mom was trying to send me home with leftover Caesar salad. I'm like, this is going to be disgusting by the time I get to my house. Like, we all know salads have like that crispiness, what they promise, has a expiration time. To hear like how quickly this moves and how important those drivers are to that product being worth anything at the end of the day, I thought was really impressive. And it sounds like you might be getting into food as well. But this is fresh, good food. So I'll
Yes.
end it with that. This is
Especially at an airport, which is,
yes.
it's tough to find fresh, good food at an airport that just isn't going to make you feel like you're just bogged down.
Yes.
So I love this. And I love that they're so transparent about the whole process, because I think that a lot of companies could learn a thing or two about being this transparent with where their food comes from, like how
Yeah.
it works, and allowing your audience and your customers to be smarter about your product, I think is always a bonus. So yeah,
A quick bonus too I want to add to it that made me laugh. Um, so on the side of the machines is where you can grab silverware. They've been experimenting with so many different ways to vend the silverware. Because a reporter brought up, he's like, "Do people just steal all this all the time?" He said, "100%, yeah, they do." And he's like, "But it's not worth vending silverware because the harder, the more weird shape something is, it gets stuck in there." So I can't remember the loss they said. Like he said it was like a 0.02 on their P&Ls. Like but it's funny to me that like it's something to consider if you're ever going to start a company, like how are you vending the silverware, and to just know it's better, it's more cost efficient to just know it's going to get stolen than to find a way to have no one steal the silverware that they're giving out.
It's cool though that you can actually like reach out to them if you want to request a fridge.
Yeah.
Which I think is awesome from like a vending machine perspective, is that you can have more options than like Dr. Pepper and Reese cups, which is, I think a struggle for a lot I trying to eat healthy on the road.
Their pasta salad was so good, and like the spinach in it was like so fresh. I honestly slightly surprised. So, and you would think too, the pasta like maybe after time would get like, sometimes too soggy or too wet. No, it was delicious. So
that's awesome.
Yeah.
Heck yeah. Well, I mean, that's I feel like it's a great sort of jumping off point to get into what my favorite freight business, and also source to porch, because it's I'm going to combine those into two, because every time I get on social media, it's one of those things where it's like everything is trying to kill us.
Yes.
Whether it's the food system and, ultra processed foods, and, trying to navigate that to like sunscreens, and, American sunscreen is, technically like bad for you, or not bad for you, but just the lack of innovation that's happened within sunscreens. It's something like we haven't had a new sunscreen that's been approved since the 90s. And so what I've been doing is I've been just importing sunscreen from Korea or Japan, because those sunscreens are so much better. And they also double as skincare and double as makeup. And so I'm actually wearing like one now, like a BB cream that has skincare benefits, and then it also has SPF. And so using those different ingredients, anyways, lots of things are trying to kill us, especially if you live in the United States. Food is one of those things. And this actually, I will say that this affects the entire globe, because it's fighting against food fraud. And Business Insider, which, Business Insider, I think they're kind of a scummy organization, a scummy news company, but they do make some cool videos at times. I disagree with how they kind of go after people and try to cancel people online. However, some of their documentary style videos I think are very good. And I just recently watched one on 11 of the most commonly faked foods. And they're faked, and you have no idea that they're being faked. And so it's things like olive oil, Wagyu beef, honey, olive oil, seafood is another big one. All of these foods can be faked. And so it's basically like the way that they fake them is that they're like olive oil, for example, they're cutting it with other like seed oils, or sometimes they're cutting it with like a peanut oil. So think about if you have like a peanut allergy and you are buying something that says olive oil on it, but they're cutting it with a cheaper olive oil or cheaper oil, such as peanuts, like that's very dangerous. Like it could obviously have some very negative reactions to that. So there's frankly, there's not much that we can do, especially from like the FDA perspective, because in our imports and customs, we're really only looking at a less than 1% of all food shipments that are coming into the United States. That's all the FDA has budget for. And so it's a really, really challenging situation. So really the onus, unfortunately, falls on the consumer to become more educated. And so let me pull up this video and we'll play. Share this tab. And so this video obviously comes from Business Insider, and I'm going to play it on why this problem has become so widespread.
Is this problem so widespread? And why is it hard to catch the criminals? Some criminal groups are so well structured, they operate like companies with multiple departments. They even have teams researching consumer trends to decide what to counterfeit next. In one Italian olive oil ring, the culprits hired food scientists to create recipes. The counterfeiters will then secure suppliers and set up sophisticated factories and abandoned warehouses. They operate in areas where real products are made, so their movements don't arouse suspicion. Criminals will bottle up the fraudulent product to look like real ones, down to a fake batch number. To sell their counterfeits, they often knock on restaurant doors or set up fake websites or postings. Operating virtually and shipping products through multiple countries makes it much harder to trace. Europol helped break up 40 organized crime rings committing food fraud in 2022, including an Italian gang exporting fake olive oil, a network passing off gardenia saffron in Spain, and a fake spice operation in South Africa. But with massive international supply chains, it's really hard to catch all the counterfeits. While the USDA inspects imported meat and eggs, the Food and Drug Administration is responsible for the rest, and it's estimated the FDA inspects just 1% to 2% of imported foods.
And they have made very clear that they consider the drug side of their equation a higher priority, and they always had and probably always will have finite resources. I disagree with that logic because I look at the food we eat as the only drug that everybody takes every day.
And even if they're caught, the punishment isn't usually as harsh as drug trafficking.
This is big crime, and why not? It's huge money. It's better than dealing drugs for them, because no one's going to break your door down at 4 a.m. and arrest you for selling rubbish honey.
Larry says two things could deter counterfeiting before it starts: tougher sentencing and the use of blockchain to track the supply chain through labels.
So I think the situation is improving, just not enough. I think we need clearer laws, real penalties, and real enforcement, not just a slap on the wrist. You can't legislate crime away, but you can certainly, make it tougher.
But some of it comes down to the consumer.
Because I think if we stop buying the really cheap, horrible product, actually, in the end, this fraud will become far less of an issue.
Buy things in their whole form. You know what a lobster looks like, but you buy like lobster ravioli, sometimes there's no lobster in it.
And always look at the ingredient list. Because if you know how to differentiate the real stuff from the fake stuff, the decision of what you put in your body becomes yours.
The consumer does have power. Though we appear to be utterly disempowered in this debate, we're not.
People should not live their lives in fear of going to the supermarket. Make it your mission as a consumer to try to buy things that are better.
Yeah, so unfortunately, it does come down to the consumer. I thought that it was really right. It figure it out for yourself, sort of fend for yourself mentality. Now, I will say that learning how to read a food label on the back of every product is if you haven't learned that, please take the time to learn that, because looking at the sugar count, looking at the serving size, which is probably the most important thing, because you'll have like a bag of Doritos, for example, and the serving size, they'll give you like a sample serving size, and it's like 3 chips is like a serving size. And so the amount of serving sizes per container, looking at the carbohydrates versus the protein versus the fiber, being able to differentiate what is healthy and what isn't, and then balancing that to your overall diet, your overall fitness goals, just overall health goals. Also on the ingredient list. This actually really helped me recently with some like time of the month woman type ingredients that I've been buying that we talked about in the pre-show. Wild yam cream is one of them. And so if you're looking at the ingredient list, if the product that you're buying, if that ingredient is not first on the list, then that is cause for alarm. And so typically on the ingredient list, they list it in descending order. So the first ingredient that's going to be listed is going to be the most amount of that product that's in, whatever product you're buying. So that particular ingredient, and then they list them in descending order. So for the wild yam cream, for example, I had purchased one where wild yams were like the 6th listed ingredient. And that's a no-go for me. So I went and actually purchased a product that I could see the ingredient label online and see that wild yam was the first listed item. And so I switched products, returned the other one, got the real one that has, the majority of the product that I'm looking for instead of all the other stuff that, might be in it. But then it got me wondering, okay, so we know if you know how to read food labels, if you know how to read the ingredient label, well, I guess what is the standardization here? Like, how is it determined? How do we know what like the baseline level is for different products, and not just different products, but like steel or cement or just the basics of, if you want to make XYZ product, what kind of ingredients are in it, what is the chemical composition of those, and who gets to determine that? Enter the NIST, so National Institute of Standards and Technology, which is essentially like a government warehouse that keeps our entire society up to standard. So it's not just, the steel and the medicines and the food products and things like that, but it's also cybersecurity. So they list like cybersecurity, known vulnerabilities and different types of software and things like that. So I want to play this quick video from this YouTuber. Hold on just a second. Let me pull this up. But this YouTuber, it's called Veritasium. So Veritasium. I want to make sure that I give him credit because this is actually a really cool video. But the goal is to set a standard set these baselines for these different products. Then you can have folks that can buy that particular item. So it essentially, they're the only government organization, or one of the few government organizations that you can buy from them. So they're not just like an organization that exists to tell you what to do, but you can buy products from them in their e-store in order to, and I'll quickly show like what actually like their e-store kind of looks like, or what, things like that. Well, let me play this video first because it goes into that baseline. So they use the example of peanut butter. So if you want to make a better peanut butter, you have to get the baseline level of peanut butter, like the composition, from the NIST or from NIST in order to make a better version of peanut butter. They even do this for like how they determine like the American diet, where they take a suggested diet and then they emulsify it. Basically, just throw all of like a daily diet for a typical American, or ideal diet for a typical American. Throw it into a giant blender, blend it all together, and then they take the ingredient compositions of everything that's in that in order to come up with the American diet. And so basically, you have that baseline support to work through. So hold on, let me bring. Right point in this video. Okay, so this is the food triangle, and this comes from the NIST. The video is actually from the Veritasium channel, so I want to make sure that I give him credit. But I'll play this one.
For a reference material to be useful, it doesn't have to be the exact material a manufacturer wants to characterize, it just has to be close enough. NIST sells around 30 different food items that are spread around their food triangle. The corners of the triangle are 100% carbohydrate, 100% fat, and 100% protein. So based on their mix of these 3 macro ingredients, all foods fall somewhere on this triangle. And to characterize each one, you would want to use the closest standard reference material.
If you're trying to do your measurements and tell a regulatory authority that I'm making a food that's a kibble, but I'm measuring it against peanut butter, they're going to be saying, well, but peanut butter has a wildly different fat content. So what we want to give them is something, a matrix that looks as much as possible as what they're used to dealing with.
They even have a standard diet mix.
This is called typical diet. Through surveys, they identified what the average American eats, and they purchased it all, and they blended it all up, and then they freeze dried it into a nice fine powder. It's like a light gray powder, and this represents all the nutritional components that an average American would consume. So it represents the sugar content, it represents the proteins that you might have, any vitamins you might have, any fats you might have, is all in a little jar that we puree up.
In total, NIST has nearly 1,300 standard reference materials.
So that is and you can go onto their website and buy any of these products. Now, they are slightly expensive, but they use it as a calibration method. So like peanut butter, for example, if you wanted to make a better version of peanut butter, then you would buy that $1,000, it's literally $1,000 in this e-commerce store from NIST that you could buy that jar, then you can use it to calibrate your machinery and then add in your own, sort of extra flavoring, like maybe it's Jif, the brand, wants to add their own sort of custom blend, which obviously they do. And so they use that as a baseline to calibrate their machinery that's going to be making the goods. And this goes for steel, this goes for cement, this goes for basically any product. It sets that baseline level of those ingredients that you can buy from the government, which is, kind of, I guess bringing it full circle with, our food system, fighting against food fraud, trying as much as possible. But there are government organizations that I frankly don't want to burn to the ground. And this is one of them. So as far as like having like faith in humanity, things like that, I think this is one of those programs that is really cool from that perspective. So yeah, that's kind of bringing it full circle with trying to be smarter about our food system and trying to be a little bit better, and then knowing where the food is coming from and how we can better, just try to fight against this food fraud that happens everywhere. I mean, the seafood one was the most glaring one to me, where they're trying to pass off like this. It's estimated that over 40% of seafood that is sold inside restaurants is being faked. So while you're buying tilapia, or you think you're buying tilapia, you are buying like a much cheaper version of that fish, and it's really hard to tell. And so their advice is, try to buy it in full. Like, don't get the lobster stuffed, ravioli. Instead, you want to probably just eat the lobster whole or buy the lobster whole, because then in that whole form, you're not getting bamboozled.
Well, like something like tilapia, it's already lab made, right? Anyways, so
yeah, or
a real fish, like
part of that video, and I'll link to it in the show notes in case you want to check it out. But the 11 foods that are being faked, like they literally took like almost like a cookie cutter, and they put it in the middle of a fish, and they're passing it off as scallops, like these big, like really tasty looking scallops are expensive. And so they're taking like this cheap fish that they could put a cookie cutter into it, and they never know. You would never know it eating at a restaurant. And so if you're in situations like this, know your own source to porch, know your own, sort of, health goals, dietary regulations, things like that you want to, or dietary goals, I guess I should say. But knowing how to read a food label, knowing how to read the ingredient list, and just trying to be a little bit smarter, because everybody is trying to kill us.
Yeah, 100%. Yikes. Now I'm starving.
Yeah, me too. I actually got to go to, I'm going to lunch with the bestie, and I know you got to go, enjoy the lake. Hopefully you'll collect some sea glass for me.
Yes.
Yeah, I guess that this is a good point to sort of close out the show. Any last words you want to leave the audience with? Where to find your work, all that good stuff?
Yeah, go, especially with the Samsara stuff, we're going to be releasing videos on that over the next couple weeks. So go check out our YouTube page. And then, of course, go check out freightways.com for some wonderful articles as well. There's an article I'm working on right now that I'll probably talk about in the next episode on a conveyor highway system for just freight that's being worked on in Japan. So it's a little highlight of an article. It'll probably be out by the time you see this. So yeah, go check that out. And appreciate it as always, Blythe.
Yeah, likewise. Go watch Independence Day and watch
Yes.
the only president that I respect is Bill Pullman in Independence Day.
Jed
so.
Bartlett, West Wing. That's an election.
I didn't watch
right
West
there.
Wing. Sorry.
What?
Oh,
and I have to watch Independence Day. Okay.
Yeah, it's very fitting. You have to watch it tomorrow.
Deal.
All right. Thank you guys, everyone. This has been another great episode. Look in the show notes if you want to watch any further videos on everything we talked about here or anything that we mentioned. But until then, we'll see you next time and have a good 4th, everyone, which if by the time you're listening to this, it's already going to be the 4th. So hopefully you enjoyed yourself.